What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Corporate Bartender. Today's show is just excellent. We are jazzed to have James McKim on the program. If you don't know James, count your lucky stars that you're here. He's the founder and managing partner at Organizational Ignition, where he and his team help organizations ignite efficiency through aligning people, processes, and technology. He's a speaker, coach, change manager, presenter, and is the author of The Diversity Factor, Igniting Superior Organizational Performance. Today we're talking about DEIB as it relates to measurable organizational performance. This is bottom line stuff here, folks. Profitability, innovation, decision-making, and engagement. And I think you're going to dig it. So buckle up, TCBers, grab your favorite cocktail, and let's get right on into it with James McKim on today's TCB.
Welcome to SkyTeam's The Corporate Bartender, where we gather some of the best HR and people leaders to discuss what's happening on the people side of business. Now pull up a stool, belly up to the bar, and join us for The Corporate Bartender.
Let's get going, everybody. It is Wednesday. It's your favorite day and mine. It's Corporate Bartender Day. It is the 1st of June. So we are almost halfway through 2022. I don't know about you, but I still have a hard time thinking that 2021 is completed, and it's all still 2020 to me for some reason. I don't know why. But here we are for the 134th time, and I think Lindsay Hersey's been here 134 times, which is pretty darn awesome. Today's going to be a fun day. We've got a guest. We've got James McKim. Say hello to everybody, James.
Hello, everybody.
James is the author of The Diversity Factor, Igniting Superior Organizational Performance. He's the founder and managing partner at Organizational Ignition, where he and his team help organizations ignite efficiency through aligning people, processes, and technology. He's a speaker, he's a coach, he's a change manager, he's a conference presenter, and diversity is his jam. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and sort of round out our little mini series on DEIB. What I love about this one is that it's a direct correlation to organizational performance. So want to get into that. So let's welcome James. Give him a big TCB welcome, everybody. Just a reminder, we've got another guest coming up on the 22nd of June, the author of The Revelation Conversation, Inspire Greater Employee Engagement by Connecting to Purpose. So that should be fun too. And a little reminder, next week we will be TCB free because Ruby and I are going to Mexico. What? That's right. Ruby and me and Lori and her husband, Rick, are going to a music festival down at Rocky Point, Puerto Peñasco, Mexico. It's a bucket list item for, I think, all of us, and we're super stoked. So Wednesday is travel out day for me and Lori. So we will not be here next week, but we will be back with hangovers and sunburns the week after that.
Accurate.
So today's news you can use item, this I posted out on the network the other day. We've talked about return to work until we can't anymore. And what I thought was interesting about this one is, now that we're sort of neck deep in it, it's starting to change again. Right. All of these best laid plans that organizations had about we're going to do 3 days in and 2 days out. And that's the golden ratio. And that's what everybody's going to live by. Well, turns out that that's not what everybody's into. The headline that pointed me to this article was, we reopened offices and nobody wants to come back. So what do we do now? And there is a lot of interesting things in there about just creative ideas that companies are doing to make coming into the office feel worthwhile. Down to executives saying, if you don't have a reason to be here, don't bother, right? Don't come here to sit in your cube and be on Zoom meetings all day. Right. So conference rooms are getting a reboot. They're getting, more cozy, couchy hangout space reboots. It was interesting. Separation anxiety was the thing that came out of some of this research. Not people being anxious about not being around other people, people being separated from their dogs and their pets because they've been with them 24/7 for so long. It reminded me of that cartoon that came out about, I don't know, three or 4 months into the pandemic, where it was two sort of parallel news articles, one written by dogs and one written by cats. And the one written by dogs was like, we should keep it this way forever, dogs. And then the other one was, they should go back to work yesterday, cats, right? So that separation anxiety, that's been an interesting thing. The notion of retirement, the people that have jumped into it and then jumped back out of it, people that have left companies and come back. I was talking with a client just the other day about the number of return employees that they're having, people that left during the quote great resignation. So in the last 6 to 12 months that are already coming back. That's interesting. Inflation driving people's willingness to want to come back to the office. It was one thing to devote 3 hours and $30 a week to commuting to work, and 3 hours a day and $100 a week is a whole different ballgame, right? So all of those things. It's an interesting read. It's not very long, but it's an interesting one because it's got a bunch of stories from companies that have tried things that didn't work out, right? Like Apple, which was a big surprise, made a big push that everybody needed to be in 3 days a week, and they're already backed off that, right? Facebook did the same thing, or Meta rather did the same thing. And then other companies like BlackRock, a private equity firm, they're just like, do what you need to do. We'll figure it out. And Goldman Sachs is really just harping on the 5 days a week, 8 to 5, sorry, 9 to 5. It's New York. Butts in seats, right? And it's not going over well. So definitely worth the 4 or 5 minutes it takes to read through it. If it helps you as you're assessing your own return to work struggles, I think every client I've talked to they've written a plan, they've put it in place, and it hasn't worked out the way they wanted it to. Ruby and I were with the client in Tucson, Arizona last week, and they have this awesome building that will house about, 150, 200 people. Yeah. And there were how many people in the building when we were there?
Like 20, maybe.
Maybe. Right.
And that feels like a suck of energy too. It's so quiet. Quiet. It doesn't feel fun to be there.
Right. Yeah. Even though the building was cool and the rooms had fun amenities, and there's a bar in the middle of the first floor and with snacks. Beer taps and snacks and yeah, but it was definitely meant for a lot more people. Definitely meant for a lot more people. Hey, Morag. Good to see ya.
Eric, did you see the article that Debbie just posted on the network?
I did not. I saw something pop in. What was it?
It was about Tesla and SpaceX and Elon Musk saying, you guys are coming back to the office, or you all are coming back to the office for 40 hours a week, or you can leave.
Whoa.
Like very, very firm.
Yeah.
I'll go grab the link.
Well, he basically said, if the factory workers have to be there, so do you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hope that works out for you, Elon.
Yeah.
If I were a betting person, I don't know that I'd put my money on that play, but okay.
Yeah, it's pretty harsh.
But that's what he does though, right? He rolls the big dice. He doesn't dance around the thing. He just says what he wants. And if it doesn't work out, he'll make a different decision. That's kind of his style, which I can appreciate. But just in watching the whole acquisition of Twitter unfold, that's not going super smooth either. So he's got a lot of curves in the road to navigate. All right. Well, let's get on into our conversation with James. James McKim, you heard about it at the beginning of the show. He's the author of this book here, The Diversity Factor, Igniting Superior Organizational Performance. And the big idea here is that there's a lot of research out that confirm that diverse organizations outperform their peers who are not diverse across a wide range of key performance metrics like profitability and innovation and decision-making. Employee engagement is a big one. So we're going to get into that. But a lot of company leaders are reluctant to work on DE&I initiatives. We've been talking about it a great deal. And I was telling James in the pre-show that as HR, OD, and learning and development people, we jump on the things that we're supposed to do. And there's a lot of them, these initiatives, big societal initiatives. And we wrestle with, are we doing this effectively? Are we doing the right stuff? Are we just ticking boxes because someone told us we needed to tick boxes? Where can we really get hard business results in initiatives like this? And that's one of the things that really excited me about this book and about having James on the show was this direct connection between diversity and organizational performance. So let's give him a little round of applause. James, welcome. Excellent. So James, tell us a little bit about you and your journey when you were a little kid. Did you want to be a DEIB expert with a hot book on the topic?
Never imagined that would happen. No, I started off when I was in high school. My high school got, and this was back in the 70s, got its first computer. And I just fell in love.
Ooh.
And so I was in the second computer class that the school had. And I could spend hours and hours and hours on the computer, and the time would just fly by and I wouldn't even know it. So I went on to Dartmouth College and got my bachelor's in computer science. Along the way, I also got my bachelor's in philosophy.
Well, that's competing ends of the spectrum.
It
one very defined thing and one thing about the definition of everything.
We've got Laura's sophisticated basic. So most people say that until I make the connection. I'll say one word and you will immediately get how they're connected.
Okay.
Logic.
Fair.
Right? Now, I say that,
fair.
But that's not why I liked both of them. And I like to say I can explain what a bit and a byte is, and I can theorize to its existence.
I love it. I love it. So you did the computer science first?
I did the computer science first, and then I got a bachelor's in philosophy. And I went to work at a small software development house right out of college.
Okay.
Did that for a few years, and then moved over to Digital Equipment Corporation, which was the second largest computer company in the world, second to IBM for a great number of years. There was the great right sizing. They tell you to call it right sizing, not downsizing. Right. That happened in the 90s, and I left and started my first consulting practice, focused on helping companies develop their IT strategic plans and do their IT strategic planning. I left that after about 10 years and realized, well, I'm doing this consulting on how to do strategic planning for IT, but I've never really led the practice myself. So I went to work for Dean Kamen and led the IT group at First, the robotics competition nonprofit, his foundation, and did that for a number of years. And then some friends of mine who were at HP in the learning and development space asked me to join them, because when I was at DEC, I did both technical stuff and I did some training and development on the internals of some of Digital's products. So I had those kinds of experiences and skills as well. So I went to HP and worked in the learning and development department for 9 years and left there as chief of staff for the technical training division. globally. And when I left there, before that, I also dabbled in creating a company that developed a patented mechanism for asset tracking. So you could put this device on any asset and track it anywhere around the world.
This is like pre-RFID?
This is pre-RFID. So we started off with a box that was shoe box size as what you would track with. And we shrunk that down to cigarette box size. But we were so early in this stage of development that we actually used pager technology to do this.
You know, you said two things in there that date you: cigarette box and pager. Yes,
indeed. So I've got that startup experience, and I'm an Episcopalian, so I've been actually during this time kind of got dragged into doing work on racial reconciliation. The Bishop of New Hampshire kind of asked me to lead the anti-racism task force for the diocese. And when your bishop asks you to do something,
you do.
Yes. So I was doing that all along with being in the corporate world. And after I left HP, which was in 2019, I started off wanting to just do strategic consulting, really management strategic consulting, because I'd been around enough that I had some expertise in that and a desire to do that. And then George Floyd was murdered.
Oof.
And Breonna Taylor, and the world just flipped, which was similar to the flip in 1964,
right?
With what happened then, but it's a bit different because we have technology that within the hands of the woman who filmed the George Floyd murder. So this time I think it's a little bit different, but for me, being in the corporate world all this time, I started thinking about, what's missing out of this equation? What are we not talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And I already had this idea to create a book called Diversity, Good or Bad for an Individual. But I started thinking, well, people...
Are you even allowed to say that? Good or bad? I mean, diversity is good. That's what we're told, right?
Well, that's what we're told. But there's so many people, as you know, who think diversity, we don't have it. We don't need it.
Right.
So I had this idea about individuals, and there were books around, but I looked and went, well, where are the books around diversity for organizations?
Mm-hmm.
And there really weren't too many. And any that there existed focused on organizational performance from the perspective of how do we make social justice reason for doing this?
Oh, gotcha.
Right. I didn't really see anybody talking about how do we do this for the reasons that it helps with organizational performance overall.
Mm-hmm.
And, so many people, and we talk about this in the HR world, so many people, when they think of organizational performance, think of short-term financial profitability.
Right. Just till the next earnings release.
Till the next earnings release. If you're a publicly traded company, you've got to keep that image up for the market, right? But my experience was that there's so much more to organizational performance that I thought we're missing by focusing just on financial performance.
Mm-hmm.
So in reading, I ran across Universalia's work in creating what they call the institutional and organizational assessment model. And their model is a framework, and they say that organizational performance is the balance of efficiency, effectiveness, relevance, and financial viability.
Oh, I like that.
And that really resonated with me because it was much more than just the short-term financial profitability that we kind of focus on, what leaders really focus on. And other research and looking at the McKinsey studies and the PwC studies that have the data that backs up that it's more than just the financial aspects. Although those studies do focus on the financial viability piece and don't talk so much about the relevance and the effectiveness and the efficiency piece. And that's why I thought, well, no one's really written about this. I might as well.
Right.
And that's why a great number of the book is on those aspects other than the financial, although we talk about the financial viability piece as well. So that's kind of where I got to where I am.
That's awesome. I love that. I love this notion of efficiency, effectiveness, relevance, and financial viability. The one that popped out for me as you were talking about it is relevance. What does that term mean in this model?
Yeah. So in this model, I looked at relevance, and there's a Venn diagram in the book that shows this, that talks about what is relevance. Mm-hmm. What are the components of relevance? And it boils down to the perception of the users, the perception of the people in the organization who are developing the products and services, and the perception of the society in general about what you're doing. Right? So when you put those three things together, relevance in terms of diversity is, are you able to bring different perspectives to the table that will help make sure that your products are going to be relevant to as broad a customer base or client base as possible? Are you operating in such a way that you attract diverse people into your organization so you'll get those diverse perspectives? Mm-hmm. And then how are you looking in society? Are you being seen as being open and honest and transparent? Or are you being seen as closed-minded? And what comes to mind there for me is we have the religious wars between those who are okay with the Apple ecosystem that is closed versus being part of the open systems mantra that's Android and Linux and all of that. So which ecosystem do you want to be part of, and which is relevant to you, where you feel comfortable being?
That's so funny, because it's funny. It makes me think about, I'm trying to think about what's popping into my head in the frame that you just presented it, right, as this diversity frame. Because when I think about it as the Apple closed system, that's the efficient one, right? Versus the Android open system that's full of bloat and hackability, right? The trade-offs between those two things, right? You talked in the book about having to question some long-standing assumptions and myths and things that we think about, that are part of our operating system. Yes. So your question right there made me do that, just thinking about Apple versus Android. What are the other myths, assumptions, things that we've carried along with us in our journey that we need to make sure that we're questioning here?
So I think one of the myths that we have to really question is diversity is just about race or just about gender. And it's about so much more than that. And I love to use Marilyn Loden's diversity wheel notion of diversity is really about characteristics of our personalities.
Ooh, I like that.
And when we think of characteristics of our personalities, we think of race, yes, gender, yes, age. We think of, and she calls those few primary characteristics that don't change much over, if at all, over our lifetimes, right? So those primary characteristics, but then the secondary characteristics, those characteristics that do change over our lifetimes, but still make up our personalities. So where are we physically located? With the article again. What are our habits? What are personal habits? What's our religion? How much do we make? What's our socioeconomic status? And so the myth that diversity is all about race or all about gender is one of those I think we need to really re-examine, because we have diversity everywhere we go, right? Even though I live in New Hampshire and we are 87% white state, and there are people here who say, well, there's no diversity here. And I say, well, it depends on your definition of diversity. There may not be a lot of racial diversity across the state, but we certainly have a equal balance of male versus female.
Yeah.
Right. We certainly have people who are skilled at many different things, and we have different socioeconomic status all over the state. Right?
In New Hampshire doesn't have a lot of city people, a lot of country people.
A lot of country people. We are, even Manchester is considered by the USDA as a rural area.
Really? That's the biggest city. We discussed that in the pre-show.
Yes, we discussed the pre-show. Manchester at 110,000 people is the largest city in the state of New Hampshire, right? So that's one myth that diversity is really just about race. I think another myth that we really need to look at is that if we focus on diversity, we have to take our eye off the ball of other things that are more important. And I think diversity and thinking about diversity and having diverse people is actually one of the most critically important things that we can look at. And and not just having diversity, but having equitable inclusion of diversity. Because diversity by itself, and it's maybe even another myth, people say, well, we need to have a diverse organization. We need to have a lot of diversity. Mm-hmm. Having diversity by itself is a prerequisite to having good organizational performance, but you also have to have equitable inclusion. If you don't have equitable inclusion, then you could get confusion. You could get miscommunication, right? If people aren't organized in such a way that the diversity can be leveraged and harnessed, then you have to cause more harm than good.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack there. I mean, it's funny, right? I mean, as open-minded and as forward-thinking as we like to think we are, you know, humans are creatures of pattern, and we lean on those patterns because they have been successful in the past. So I love thinking about these frameworks in that regard, James. That's awesome. When we get to the sort of central question, right? I mean, we've seen the research. You mentioned the McKinsey research and the PwC research that diverse organizations outperform non-diverse organizations in these certain key metrics. When you were coming up with this concept, what does DEI have to do with organizational performance, and why is that a thing?
It's a thing because the more perspectives you have at the table, the better your decisions are going to be to make. There's research that says diverse organizations are 87% more likely to make better decisions.
That's a big deal. That's no laughing matter metric. 87%.
No. It's a huge deal that organizations aren't aware of. Diversity impacts and the different perspectives allow you to see what customers want in diverse markets. So if you ask what your market is today as an organization, your market is probably going to be people like you in your organization, because you may not have the different perspectives to know that in this particular market segment, these are the things that they want.
Right.
These are the things that they will pay extra for, which you may not already have designed into your product or service.
I mean, it's similar to the hiring manager's conundrum, right? We tend to hire people that look and sound like us.
That's right. Affinity bias.
Yes.
We all have affinity bias. We're as a human species, we are tribal.
Right.
Right. So affinity bias, confirmation bias, a whole host. I've been doing research. I was amazed that there are over 400 biases that have been identified.
Wow. How do we even keep track of all that, James?
Well, we don't. And they tend to be in three categories that the research has shown. They're in decision-making, in socializing, and in memory. Three categories of biases, right? And it's amazing to dissect those and figure out how to get over them. And I was looking at the episode with DDS, and you're talking about biases, and you asked them, how do you get over them?
Yeah.
You know, there are 9 techniques for debiasing yourself.
Wow.
So yeah, working through those 9 is what many organizations should be helping everyone in the organization do, figuring out what's the best technique for everybody to overcome bias is one of those barriers to achieving organizational performance.
It's crazy, right? You think 400 biases, 9 techniques to debias yourself. It's a lot of work. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit in the pre-show, and we've talked about it in the DDS episode and with Ray Arata. You know, there, as HR, good HR people, we know this is a thing that we need to be paying attention to. And it's so big and it's so broad. How do we separate the wheat from the chaff and focus on the things that really matter, that are going to bring us those organizational performance returns, financial viability maybe notwithstanding? But right. I was expressly interested in some of your comments on engagement, the statistically significant comments around engagement. How do we as good HR people figure out what to focus on? Because it's a lot.
So my sense is we start with, it's so ironic to me that a lot of what we talk about for diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging is really just good leadership.
Right.
Right?
It's the don't be a jerk rule.
It's the don't be a jerk rule. It's be kind, as we talked about in the other show. It's be inclusive.
Yeah.
It's understand your own limitations. Jennifer Brown, in her book, How to Become an Inclusive Leader, has this great leadership development continuum. And she talks about we all need to start with awareness, as you talked about in the other shows, of being aware that diversity is an issue, and it's in an organization. As a leader, you have to do more than just be compliant, because so many organizations only deal with diversity because the EEOC rules, in the United States at least, say you must treat people fairly. But once you come to an awareness and understanding that there's a benefit to diversity, equity, and inclusion that leads to belonging, then you move into what Jennifer calls the active stage. Mm-hmm. Where you're learning, you know you need to learn more, and you want to apply that. You want to be an ally. You want to support people in being their best, because it's not about how much you know as a leader. Mm-hmm. It's about how you motivate others to be their best. Right? And once you do that, once you start to become an ally and become active, then you can become an advocate. And an advocate is someone who looks for the barriers that are preventing people from being as successful as they can be, right? And that advocacy piece is so important. So I think, first of all, we need to look at our leaders and say, how do we develop our leaders so that they are inclusive leaders, that they understand the difference between equity and equality, that we need to treat people equitably, meet them where they are with whatever skills and strengths they have, and help them to shore up their weaknesses. So working with leaders, I think, is key. I think also helping management understand that, as we've been talking about, diversity, equity, and inclusion is good for the organizational performance, not just for the social justice reasons.
Right.
One of the top 4 reasons why diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts fail is because of lack of commitment from leadership to set the tone that says, we will concentrate on this. This will be a priority because it's going to help us from an organizational performance perspective. Right?
It's a big deal. You used a couple of words in there, and I want to just ask a question about vocabulary, because I know we struggle with making sure that we're saying the right things and using the correct terminology. And you used the word ally, and we've talked about allyship here in this community before. And you used the word advocacy. What is the difference between allyship and advocacy?
Sure. So an allyship is on an interpersonal basis. Allyship is about
so like one-to-one,
one-on-one, coming alongside someone and helping them to get through whatever it is that they're trying to get through.
Got it.
Advocacy is looking systemically.
Oh,
for the most part. You can't advocate for an individual as well, but in Jennifer Brown's sense, advocacy is looking at systems and seeing where systems should be changed to prevent discrimination from happening, to be more inclusive.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I love that. That's super, super helpful. When you talk about DE&I and its relationship to organizational performance, in your book, you use Kurt Howell's organizational performance system framework.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how that came into your work?
So I'm big on organizational performance. I said I work on strategic planning, and I ran across that title just thinking about organizational performance. And I got
which is the title of his book, Organizational Performance.
Organizational Performance, the 21st Century Key to Success is the title of the book. And so what he talks about is the organizational performance system, which is comprised of 3 different levels. The first level is really about how your organization interacts with its clients, with its customers. And it looks at who are the stakeholders, who are the people for whom your products or services are being developed.
Designed.
Right. So that's the highest level in that organizational performance system. It looks at, he calls it the stakeholder value delivery level, looking at value propositions and how your products and services are being offered. The next
listen, HR people, those are all words that CEOs love. Value proposition, stakeholder.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is so, I think, important for us as HR professionals. We need to be using the language of our leadership.
Yes, 100%.
Orders, right? Because as soon as we get into HR wonk speak, goes right over their head.
They're out.
They're out. They're out. Right? And you're likely to be out.
Right.
If you're not using that language. So the second layer that he talks about, he calls the technical and the core competencies. And that's where you get into more of the process stuff. So looking at product development or service development, looking at how products are manufactured, looking at how sales and marketing is done, looking at how customer service is done, those processes that lead to thinking about efficiency. Right? Remember,
like in a Peter Drucker sense of the word?
Peter Drucker sense of the word, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So, and I also relate, we talk about organizational performance being about efficiency, effectiveness, relevance, and financial viability. So that first layer where we're talking about stakeholder value is related to effectiveness and relevance. The second layer where we're talking about technical core competencies and processes and procedures speaks to efficiency in the organization, right? And then the third level, the kind of underlying level, is what he calls the intangibles. And this is what he calls the organizational performance drivers. So there are things like governance. How is the organization being governed? Like how are we managing human capital? Like how are we looking at high performance? And I really love PricewaterhouseCoopers has this great graphic that I use in the book that looks at what is high performance. It's about trust, it's about winning attitude, it's about several different components. So these organizational performance drivers that he talks about are about driving efficiencies and driving financial viability. So putting all those together, that's the organizational performance system, looking at those processes, procedures, and attitudes, and from that framework perspective. So the next question comes, so how does diversity, equity, and inclusion play into that, right?
Yeah.
So and I did when I wrote the book, I said, well, I'm using the term perspective a lot. Let me do a word count. Now I don't remember how many times I use the word perspective, but it's more than any other word in the book. And it's all about different perspectives at each of those levels get you best performance. So different perspectives about who your audience is and what your audience wants gives you a richer view of your audience and gives you a broader audience, as we talked about before, right? Having more perspectives at the table when you're looking at and thinking about efficiency gives you more innovative ideas and better decision, as we talked about, 87% better decisions about ideas. Different perspectives in how governance is done, different perspectives in how human capital is looked at, different perspectives in how how high-performing teams are looked at. It's that difference in perspective that permeates all of those systems to bring higher performance.
I love that. I love that. And I want to open it up to questions and give folks a chance to ask you a question. But I wanted to make reference to, you have a cartoon in the book that just made me giggle.
Which one? I tried to put a few in to make it.
Yeah. So the one that really kind of resonated for me was it has two people and they're standing here in a very stereotypical office environment. And the quote underneath the cartoon says, "Our goal is to establish language that is gender neutral, ethnic neutral, and age neutral, while celebrating our spirit of diversity."
Right.
And, we talked about this a few weeks ago. We had a pretty candid conversation with some leaders of color around the language that we use. And as HR people, we're always trying to say the right thing, which is why. And I gave James the heads up that sometimes we get a little blue in this room because we don't have any other venue in which to do this. Because we're always trying to say the right thing. We want to make sure that we're towing the line with regard to language. And this cartoon really resonated with me because that's, in a nutshell, HR's dilemma with DEIB, right? Because we're supposed to be celebrating the thing that we're not really allowed to talk about using language that directs, attention to any one specific thing.
Right. Yeah. And what I've come to really try to help people grasp is, first of all, we're humans.
Right.
We're going to make mistakes. Just accept that at the get-go, right? And we need to create environments where it's okay to make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes.
Yes.
Right? So we have to be okay with making mistakes. And I think there's so many people who don't want anyone to make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
That stifles us. It just stifles us. It stifles creativity, and it makes us feel like we don't belong. C.E. Garcia said there are 5 components of belonging, where you're valued as an individual, where you can see people who look like you, where you have something in common with others, where you have a role or responsibility, and where you feel like you can be your authentic self.
Love it.
Right?
Love it. Morag had a question on that point. What's your question there, Morag?
Well, this is where it makes my head explode, because you've got 190. What am I trying to belong to?
Well,
as an English woman in America, and we talk about if I get making our language vanilla, even that. Well, vanilla is invariably white ice cream. Is that wrong? But how do you dilute language when you and I don't even speak the same language? We overlap a bit, and there are innumerable other foreign languages and cultures whose definition of help, because any of that half-started thoughts, so, James, help.
This is great, and people ask me, because one of the hats I wear is I'm president of the Manchester branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. So I'm usually pegged as, well, what do Black people think? And I have to say, well, I can tell you what I've heard, but I'm only one person.
Yeah.
And if I speak, I speak from my personal experience. I can say what I think. I happen to know that people think differently than I do. So for me, it's all about relationships.
Ooh, you're speaking my language now, James, definitely.
Every person has a different take. Every person has a different set of experiences that make up who they are and how they think. So you can speak about using a certain language, but it's great to preface, and I do this workshop called How to Have Difficult Conversations. And a colleague of mine, Dr. Dottie Morris, says that for conversations, we really need to set the table to have a good, productive conversation. Setting the table is all about understanding who this other person is we're talking with, where they're coming from, and what language they use. So you shouldn't have to guess what the right words are to say to this person to make this person understand you. You're not in their shoes. You can't know what language to use. You can only use the language that you have, but if you preface it with this relationship that lets the other person know that you're trying to use the right words, but you're going to mess up because you're human. Right? Give yourself a break. Be patient with yourself and be patient with others is one of the conversational norms I like to use. And just be upfront and honest and say, I'm going to say something. I may mess it up. Please, excuse me, please correct me if I'm wrong. Back to the DDS conversation you had a couple of weeks ago. I may get it wrong. I'm trying. My intention is good. I'm going to take responsibility for my impact, right? I may have to say, oops, or you may say, ouch, that something didn't land on you right. But I'm trying. Help me to communicate better. Right?
Yeah. So many good points in there. Right. And to your comment, James, it reminded me as you were talking of when Ruby asked DDS a question and she made a reference to both genders.
Right.
And they said, Ruby, can I offer you some feedback? Exactly. And Ruby said, well, yes, DDS, you can. Thank you.
Great.
Yep. Yeah, the continuum. There are 4 aspects of gender. Biology is only one of them. Gender identification, gender expression, and then sexual orientation.
It goes back to what you said earlier on, James. Diversity has never been the issue. Diversity, whichever way you want to slice it, has always been there. It's that sense of belonging and inclusion that we've mastered, mistressed in the years of excluding people based on arbitrary things.
Yeah, and it makes me think about, because I'm of a certain age, and when I was coming up in HR, that was when all the EEOC things started to happen, and you had to do your affirmative action planning, right? And counting things doesn't speak to inclusion or belonging in any way whatsoever, right?
That's right.
Right. So yeah, it's a complex beast. Lori, you got your hand up.
Yes, in the spirit of yes, we get to be real, as it were. I had a new experience for me on Sunday, and I have to say it was enlightening, but it was also very uncomfortable. So, and not saying
as they usually are, those enlightening ones.
Discomfort helps us learn, but in any event, as an in-flight support coach, I have to train people, and I'm kind of like on the practicum side. So they get on the plane and thumbs up, thumbs down. We have to evaluate them. And anyway, I was very busy over the whole weekend because somebody called off sick, and I was a last minute stand-in on it for a couple of flights. But in any event, the last Sunday I had Jonathan, and Jonathan showed up as Samantha, and it threw me for a real loop. We have our picture IDs, we have our official paperwork, everything. And again, usually I have interactions with my people before they get on the plane. And because this was a last minute situation, I didn't have that usual interaction. And so again, it kind of threw me off. I'm expecting Jonathan, and it's Samantha. Samantha was very gracious, very sweet, no issues whatsoever. But I was the only person on my crew that knew it was Jonathan. I'll be very honest with you. And I never said a word to anybody. But I just, the pronouns, I'm just like, I got to really watch myself, because I did not want to offend her at all. But it was just, I was caught off guard. And like I said, usually I can at least kind of prepare myself, not that this is, we've had one other transgender person join our company. It was a few years ago. So again, this is a new thing, and it's coming up, and yeah, I'm in my 50s, and this is a new thing. So nonetheless, I would have to say I've had interactions with her since the training, because I'm a coach, and I think everything went well. I think my crew was great. One of my crewmates did say he at one point. I don't think anybody heard. It's just like, so again, that discomfort, that newness, I think is what kind of threw me off. But yet at the same point in time, we don't want to offend, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and we certainly want to be inclusive. I work with a lot of gay people in my industry, and I love them. I mean, I have some really great friends. And so it's not about that diversity, if you will, but I think that one kind of throws us off just a little bit, because again, I know the truth from a paperwork standpoint. Had I not seen the paperwork, I wouldn't have known otherwise, to be very honest with you. I would not have known. Samantha has been Samantha for a long time, evidently. But nonetheless, that's, I'm just being real. Like I said, it was a little bit of a leap for me, but I would call it a growth experience.
Yeah, it is. And it just points out to me the notion, something else that we as I think HR professionals can help our folks with is we have to get comfortable with discomfort.
Yes.
Because it's
so true.
It's and I saw this great article about change, and it's not that we're resistant to change, we're resistant to being uncomfortable.
That's exactly right.
Change makes us uncomfortable. So we have to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, and as HR people, right, a lot of times we equate our job or our remit to being the folks that help other people feel comfortable. Right.
Yes.
So accepting that, we're going to find ourselves in situations where we're going to mess it up and we're going to feel uncomfortable, means they are too. And that kind of goes against what our credo is as HR people,
Right. And
so it's just letting that go.
It's letting that go. And Ruby's bringing up a really great point that it's one of the techniques for debiasing yourself. And that is, you need to be exposed to people who are different from you. And in fact, if we can create these environments, and this is actually a strategy that I'm also a project management professional that we talk about in project management, is as a project manager, you want to put people with different experiences together.
Yeah.
Because it's out of that experience of working together that the biases go away.
Yeah.
And you build bonds, and you build the ability to work with people who are different than you are.
As the father of 2 theater kids, I got to tell you, they look at the world in an entirely different way than I do, right? Because they work with a wide variety of people and backgrounds and approaches and orientations, and they just think about the world in a different place. They're not uncomfortable in that space.
And in fact, the World Economic Forum did a study, and they're putting the statistics that by 2025, 70% of the leadership in corporations will be millennials. And
God bless them.
And millennials have a different view of diversity than us older.
That's old farts is what you said earlier, James.
The old farts, yeah, I use that term. And you got even the Gen Yers who are, and I don't remember if it was here or maybe it was another session, but they're demanding diversity.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right?
They will leave.
They will leave if there isn't diversity. And we've now got law firms and other folks who are in the supply chain who are saying we will only work with organizations who have a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan.
Yeah. 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 This ain't your father's Oldsmobile, as they used to say.
Absolutely.
Guys, I know we're coming up on top of the hour here. Any other questions for James before we thank him for his time and this amazing conversation? Ruby, you can say it out loud.
Thank you, James. No, I learned so much. I took so many notes, and I think about the work that we do, and we teach leaders. That's our job, right? And so this is such powerful work that you do. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you for all the work that you all are doing. You're all in there fighting the good fight with your leadership teams. And
yeah.
So any way I can help with that, that's why I'm here.
I appreciate that. So whether it's the fact that we learned there are over 400 biases that everybody has, that there are 9 ways to de-bias yourselves from those, there are different levels in this organizational performance hierarchy. Just so many tangible takeaways for me today. Thank you so much, James. Big ups for James, everybody. All right. James, you're welcome to stick around. We're going to do our funny things, our good feel story, and our silly cocktail. And then we're going to get everybody out of here to dinner time. So with that, funny thing, number 1, this made me laugh because this is my life. 4 stages of a day off. 1, I will do so much stuff. 2, later, I'll do lots of stuff. 3, eventually I'll do some stuff. Oh no. And because many of us in this group are public speakers, if you're one of those public speakers that say, good morning. Oh, come on. We can do better than that. Good morning. I automatically do not like you from that moment on. We talked about fertility benefits last week. So this one made me laugh. Male birth control is free, and it's called holding a fish in your profile photo.
Okay.
Whoops.
It's got to be a certain age to get that one.
Life is a parade of absurdities and pain, and then we die alone in filth. So yes, little girl, I shall buy a box of Thin Mints. This one made me laugh, but you do have to be of a certain vintage to get this joke. It says, I'm a bitch, I'm a lover, I'm a cat churning butter. Ruby knows it. I'm a bitch, I'm a lover, from the 1993 Meredith Brooks album that nobody has but me and Ruby. That was for you, Ruby.
Thank you.
and my favorite slightly blue funny thing today. Sorry for the unsolicited deck pic. That was for someone else. That is a sexy deck. Too funny. All right, today's good feel story. This is a Memorial Day story, and he's gonna gets you every time.
Mm-hmm.
Every time. All right, today's semi-quarantine cocktail is called Witch Witch. This is a riff on the witch's heart. And this is in the spirit of our conversation today. So you're going to need a little bit of apple brandy or vodka, and then 329 years, 2 jiggers of homemade blackberry shimmery liquored. There's a recipe for that if anybody wants it. An 8th grade civics class at North Andover Middle School in Massachusetts took up this cause. You're going to need a little bit of grenadine. And Elizabeth Johnson Jr., the last accused and unpardoned witch, is clear. Took 329 years to clear a, quote, witch's name. Going to need a little dry ice and some time to think about that because we are struggling with it today. We heard it in our conversation. We heard James make mention to 1964 and the challenges there and the more complex challenges that we face here in 2022. Guys, as always, I am super grateful for each and every one of you. You make my life worth being here. You make my Wednesdays my favorite days. Thanks again to James. Thanks to all of you. And we will see everybody next week. Thanks so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, James.
Night, everyone.
Thank you. I just wanted to listen to the walkout music.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you had a good time and learned a thing or two at today's happy hour, please share it with your friends. If you want to join our tribe, head on over to skyteam.cloud/TCB or email us at info@skyteam.com. That's SKYE team.com. Thanks again, and remember, you've always got friends at the Corporate Bartender.